Today's episode of the Surf Connections podcast is brought to you by VicHealth and Surfing Victoria. Surfing Victoria acknowledges its head office is based on Wadawurrung country. We pay our respects to Wadawurrung people, their elders, past, present and emerging. We appreciate the coastline of traditional lands that we are able to surf and understand the importance of respecting country. We extend our acknowledgement to all the traditional lands you are gathered on today to listen to this podcast. Hello and welcome to Surf Connections podcast. We hope to connect women and girls of all ages and cultures who share a passion and love for the ocean. I'm Angela King, your host for Surf Connections.
And I'm Monica Fleming.
We're excited to bring the series to you as we are going to have the opportunity to talk to some incredible women and girls whose professions, career or lifestyle have evolved and flourished around the ocean and its waves.
So these women and girls have essentially paved the way for us and many others. They are prime examples of what can be achieved within surfing for all of us.
So we're so excited to introduce our guest. Kay, so she is a passionate all-round surfer, perhaps best known for her graceful and technically perfectly longboarding style. She was one of the first ever females to feature on the cover of the historical surf magazine Surfer's Journal. By being her humble and passionate self, she has influenced countless girls and women to pursue surfing and open many eyes on environmental protection and its preservation. It's our pleasure to welcome Belinda Baggs.
Hi, Ange. Hi, Monica. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. So awesome to have you.
Well, it's great to have a chat. Any opportunity to be able to talk about girls in the ocean.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so can you just kick off by telling us a little about where you grew up and when you started surfing? Just a real basic.
Yeah, so I grew up in Newcastle, New South Wales. My dad was still is a very keen surfer. So I spent every weekend with sand between my toes, building sand castles. Funnily enough, I used to fake illnesses because I didn't want to go to the beach and I got bored. And to beg mum not to take me. It wasn't until I was probably my very early teens, like 12, 13, that I really started loving the ocean and the ocean lifestyle and completely flipped the script out of my fancy little girl's clothes and wanting to go to being an absolute tomboy and jumping at any opportunity that I could to be at the beach longer and constantly bugging Dad to take me to the beach. It was quite rough in Newcastle, so it wasn't until I was probably about 14 or 15 where I finally conquered that shore break and was able to make it out the back and start to be able to paddle myself onto waves. I started riding a high-performance longboard and a shortboard. They were obviously the two most dominant types of boards at the time. Yeah. And really just found that I resonated a lot more with longboarding, really connected a lot better with the people that were doing it, which also sparked like a greater interest to, do it more and surf with my mates and stuff like that. And yeah, just kicked it off from there.
So cool. Did you have like a board riders or like a longboard club that you went in as well?
Yeah, I was part of the Steel City Longboard Club, which is the Newcastle Longboard Club at the time. I was part of that for, I don't remember, maybe like 8 or 10 years, which was really awesome. They did monthly contests, really good opportunity to meet other longboarders and connect with people in the community. And it's actually what probably sparked my interest in starting to do a few competitions, which was all surrounded by getting to spend more time with your friends and travel to amazing places.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So, a lot of people don't know currently, because you're so successful now, what you do as well, that, you were third in Women's World Longboard Championships in 2003, Open Women's Longboard Champion 2000, and obviously personally knowing because we were around the same dynamic in those years, and you were like one of those person, if you were in my heat, I'd be like, I've got to bring it, because you were so awesome, amazing, so composed from the outside observing, always, assassinated the heats to me, perfection. So yeah, I think that's kind of rad if we touch on that. So how was your experiences during those times?
Firstly, I'd like to say I think that's hilarious because I was like an absolute nervous wreck and always looked at you, Ange, and was like, oh, I got to try and beat Ange. Oh my God. So obviously the feeling was mutual.
Yeah, totally. So funny. We never spoke obviously about that. Like,
trying to act cool and composed. But I think for me, like at the time, there was, and you're familiar with a lot of these people, like there was such a great core group of longboarders who was so inspiring. For me personally, especially being in Newcastle, I was extremely inspired by Jai Burns, who was an incredible longboarder and goofy footer.
Yes, absolutely resonated.
Yeah, and he was really able to like, nose ride with such a great style, but also charge like big surf and do huge turns and things like that. So I was really inspired by him, and then obviously connections through the competitions. Dave Simons,
remember those guys.
Jared Morell, who was in Coffs Harbour Coast, Dane Wilson, Josh Constable, Harley Ingleby, like so many great names, along with obviously a lot of the girls as well, like yourself included. Jodie Barsby was always amazing to surf with. Chelsea Williams, so many of the girls, like so many great people. And I felt like these competitions were a place for us to be able to get together and share and build these great friendships, but it also inspire each other out in the water, which was really incredible. And for me, like a lot of these people at the time turned into people that I thought more of as family rather than friends. So jumped at every opportunity to like get in and hang out and have fun, and of course learn off each other. And you know, the competitions were nerve-wracking, as we brushed upon. We were all riding high-performance longboards, which I always felt like a little bit of a Gumby when I was on, like didn't quite resonate.
That's as well. Like you surf for every craft, personally, just observing over the years really well. But yeah, you surfed really good on those too. Absolutely.
Oh
my God.
Thanks. It felt a bit awkward, but
yeah.
And it also just sparked this travel bug as well. Like, you know, I'd grown up in Newcastle, but traveling to these competitions gave me opportunities to see and experience our amazing and beautiful coastline. And so many places that if it wasn't for surfing, I would have never went to. So very thankful for that.
That is so rad. Because like, do you feel as well, just acknowledging, I can't remember the sponsors you had, but I think, was it Toes on the Nose and things like that? Did they, when you got those guys observing, you got to go overseas a lot more as well?
Yeah, so when I started working with Toes on the Nose, this was kind of the opportunity they throw at me. They were like, hey, do you want to go to the, World Championships? I think they were in Costa Rica at the time. We'll send you over. And I was like, oh my God, an opportunity to visit Costa Rica, which had a stop in America, and I got to go to Malibu. And so very thankful for their support and just opening up like a whole nother world of possibilities with, my own experiences, meeting people and visiting new places, but also opening me up to a whole new perspective on surfing as well.
Perfect, because that's what I wanted to touch on too, is that, because you, again, people wouldn't realise that you were at the forefront too with traditional longboarding with women in Australia, and I'd like to say, like, honestly, internationally, there was like only a real handful of girls that started logging per se, and there was a movie, longboarders might remember or might not, and if you're new to this, you've got to check it out too if you're a longboarder. It was called Sprout, and there was Seedling. There was a number of really cool evolutionary logging films as such in 2004. Do you feel like at that stage there was a shift in the longboarding, like direction, like from progressive to traditional? Like,
completely. There was a huge shift. At the time, the first time I visited America was in either year 2000 or 2001. And there was very minimal amounts of traditional longboarding in Australia. Everyone rode high performance single fins. There was a few people who'd pull out the old Mal from time to time, which, as we all know here, is like a 1960s made longboard. But there wasn't really any like modern modern single fin, or what we call logging now, happening. I think we'd sort of seen Jimmy Gamboa come over and visit our competitions once or twice, and Tom Wagner as well. Yeah. But besides those two guys, I don't think we'd really ever been exposed to like the logging culture or way of riding waves. So when I first went to California, I was on the beach at Malibu with my tri-fin thruster that was actually fluorescent orange, and I think it had flames on it, and like true like Aussie style. And I was sliding out every time I was nose riding, and I was watching these amazing surfers like Josh Farborough, Jimmy Gamboa, Dane Peterson, Brittany Leonard, Carla Rowland, and of course Cassia Meador was there as well, riding these waves on heavy single fin logs and just nose riding through the most critical sections. And it really, really sparked my interest. Obviously because it looked beautiful, but because I kept seeing this expression on their faces every time they'd kick out from a long nose ride. And I was like, wow, I have to see what that feels like, because it looks like it's life-changing experience.
Just like,
I want some of that one, please.
So I borrowed a heavy single fin log, which was a Scott Anderson made board. He's kind of one of the main shapers who supplies boards to the crew at Malibu. It was green out of the bottom of the house, covered in dirt, delaminated, and I cleaned it up and basically spent the summer trying to learn off the crew at Malibu and grasp that sensation and that feeling that they were getting from nose riding. And finally, after a couple of months and a lot of falling and a lot of dings, I, kind of felt what that was like. And it was, as much as a corny way as it is to explain it, it felt like a pelican riding the updraft of the waves as it glided. And it completely switched my whole way of thinking about surfing, and it was all I wanted to do.
Yeah, so right. And you do it so well. That's the thing. Like, I think, again, like just personally experiencing and observing, you surf so well and everything, but I know it's just that gracefulness of how you walk to the nose, not to like butter you up too much, but legit, like legitly, just perch up there, making it look so easy. So like I remember observing when you came back from the States, even seeing, I was like, oh, what is she on? Like, what is that? What is that? Like, why? But so amazing. And
well, I called that board the Green Machine, and as battered up as it was, I did bring it back to Australia. And that was probably the first board that you seen me surfing on. I remember being at Snapper Rocks at a competition there, like I think it was called the Malfunction.
Yes.
Yeah. Good old days. And I'm pretty sure I bombed out on my heat, like first round, and lost. And had so many people come up to me being like, if you want to do good in comps, you need to get off that piece of shit.
Interesting.
Which was really interesting. And I was like, well, I don't really care because it's so much fun and I love it.
Yes.
They obviously didn't, and they still don't work amazing when the swell gets bigger. Lots of sliding out and face planting. And so I sort of saw that if I did want to keep doing contests and be a little bit versatile, then I always had a tri-fin longboard in the back of my van somewhere. But slowly that faded out and to a point where I actually don't ride them anymore. But
and do you think that influenced, because you were able to step away, or like what was because that was one of our questions, what made you
so when did you kind of walk away from competition do you think that was around the same time?
I think it was a little bit of a slow progression. I went from doing quite well in the contest to losing most of them due to the equipment that I was riding, unless we were at First Point Noosa or a wave that was very well suited for that. And so I guess, my ego was maybe a little bit hurt that I felt like I was surfing better than I ever had, and I was doing worse in the comps than I ever did. But more so, I just felt like in order to keep doing well in the comps, then I needed to, go back to my old style of surfing, which I really didn't want to do because I felt like I'd grown as a surfer. I'd grown my skill set and I was having more fun than ever. And so it was sort of a little bit of a battle internally with that, as well as you know, a lot of our mates that we were doing these competitions with that I mentioned earlier, a lot of them sort of started to move on as well, like get, you know, full-time jobs and, you know, like more of a permanent structure around their lifestyles. And so they weren't all at the competition. So it just didn't seem quite as much fun as it did. And I think around that same time, I had a few opportunities to start to do photo shoots, you know, away in overseas locations and other places in Australia. And I was like, wow, like I can go away and just surf and I don't need the stress of a competition. Like that's an amazing idea. So I just started sort of, I guess, following that that line, and it seemed to work out. And I'd never really anticipated to be a famous surfer or to make money out of the surf industry. My goal all along was just to surf and do the things I loved as much as humanly possible. And if I could get myself out of working then and spend more time in the water, then that was amazing. So the fact that, you know, I had a couple of sponsors, which I switched from Toes on the Nose and started working with Patagonia, who were really keen to support me to go to these foreign places. And so I felt like I was living the path that I was intended to. And just to brush back a little bit too, like on the point of when I started riding single fin longboards. Sorry, I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but I'm kind of excited these stories. I mentioned that I always felt a little bit awkward on single fin longboards and it didn't quite fit. I've always been clumsy on land, and for the first time ever in my life, when I jumped on a single fin longboard, I felt feminine and I felt proud to be feminine and that it was something that I wanted to showcase. And it all sort of came naturally. It wasn't something that was sort of, you know, tried to copy off somebody else. And so I think it really helped grow who I was as a woman as well.
Sick. Well, you could see that in your surfing. Like I said, you were good before, but I felt like you shone, you know what I mean? Like and do now, like when you're on that longboard, oh my gosh, it's mesmerizing, legit. Like you just make it look so easy. So yeah, no, I totally get that. That's what's so rad.
It's like your personality was kind of mixed into that change of.
Yeah, it was like a evolution, I guess.
How cool.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
And that's like touching on Patagonia, like, so what do you do for them now exactly? Like what's your role? Like you're an ambassador or what's the...
So I've been with them now for over a decade, which has been amazing. And I've had a few different roles with them. I started off product testing, and obviously mentioned doing a few photo shoots and things like that. And I probably should point out the reason I got the role with them was because at the time they just started their surf line, sort of moving from the outdoors into the surfing world a little bit. And it was a connection through Thomas Campbell, who'd actually made Sprout and Seedling that you mentioned earlier. He was talking to the Malloy brothers, and they were like, hey, Thomas, like we're looking for a girl to product test. We can't afford to, you know, get like a WSL pro surfer on board, but we really just want someone who would be stoked to have some gear and that spends a lot of time in the water. And I think as the story goes, he was like, well, no one spends more time in the water than Bindi, so you should probably send her out some wetsuits. And so that's how that relationship kind of sparked, was that I was in the water like 6 to 8 hours a day, living between Noosa and Byron and spending some time in the States. And so just product testing with all their new surf gear. That journey sort of evolved when I had my son. I was like, well, I can't really couch surf anymore with a baby, so I need to get a little bit more income happening here. And I went to them and they were like, yeah, well, we can definitely offer you a role, an employment role, which was doing social media for Patagonia Australia. Which is the thing that brought me down here to Victoria. So moved down to Victoria and learned how to do social media. So worked in that role for probably 4 or 5 years with an amazing team in Torquay. And now I guess I started spending a lot of my free time working on environmental issues for the company, just from a passion perspective, because I wanted to learn more and get more involved, and it felt like a really natural progression for me, like having my son, learning about climate change. And I was like, I have to do all I can in order to ensure that he has a safe future. Yeah. And so, I was like really spending free time with them on enviro issues. And finally they were like, okay, maybe we need to switch your roles out a little bit here. And so now I work where I guess my surfing ambassadorship intersects with those environmental issues, and campaigning and activism. And sometimes that's things where Patagonia is like, hey, we've got this campaign happening and we'd really love you to be a part of it. Can you sit in on a couple of meetings or connect with the local community? And other times it's things where I go to them and I say, hey, I've got this passion project, this coastline's threatened and I really want to work on it. And they, can potentially say, well, we don't have bandwidth to support it wholeheartedly as a company, but we're fine to grant you the time in order to go and do that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, it's
we did a freeze.
Maybe we missed that.
Yeah, maybe just re-say that. We froze for a little bit there.
Okay. I'll just say it's my dream job.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no, gosh, it would be. And I just love the
do you still get enough time in the ocean?
Yeah, doing that.
I actually do, although the last couple of months I've been setting up my own non-for-profit, and it's taken up way more computer hours than I had anticipated. So
yes, actually that's another one I think we had to ask you. Is that what's the thing you've been working on, the Surfers for Climate? Is that?
Yeah, that's it. So I guess for the last year or so, I've been working on setting up Surfers for Climate. It's a non-for-profit organisation that really bases on creating a sea roots movement around positive climate action.
Love it.
I think I visited I guess it was a bit of a workshop on Heron Island. It was almost about a year and a month ago. That was sort of just really around learning all climate impacts, and sort of really realised from that a lot of these are affecting the oceans first and foremost, and that a lot of the impacts we're seeing are actually happening in the ocean before they do occur on land. And I walked away from that with another friend who's a great surfer, Johnny Abeg, from that workshop, and we both sort of came away with the really similar idea of like, hey, we should start an organization that focuses on I guess just sharing our surfing experiences, creating awareness, and then turning that energy into action.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So sorry, go for it.
I was going to say, and Sam Sunderman, who's also one of Victoria's leading female surfers, and I'd been working with her previously on quite a few enviro campaigns, and before the workshop, Sam and I got talking and said, hey, we should start something because a lot of these actions and protests and rallies are happening in Geelong or in Melbourne, and it's sort of for a lot of people who might have half an hour to turn up but not the 2 hours round trip that it takes to get to the cities. Like it's sort of like open up ways in which I guess we can sort of provide access for the surfing community to take part in a lot of these issues. And so she's been on board helping for the last 6 to 8 months as well. So that's been amazing.
That's so awesome. So it's about bringing awareness to everyone in the community and giving people the opportunity. Is that what you're saying as well?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think there's so many stories in the ocean that are climate related, like so many impacts that we're seeing, whether it be erosion, intense storm events, acidification's really affecting our local ecology, and wiping out, big tracts of seaweed and even, kelp forests for that matter. Yeah. And obviously not down here in Victoria, but up on the Great Barrier Reef and other locations throughout the Pacific, we're seeing a lot of coral bleaching, and they're having a huge effect on, the waves and the marine life first and foremost, but, also on our enjoyment as surfers.
That is so good. No, I love that.
I know it's something that when you're in the ocean nearly every day, you have an appreciation for it. And I think then you kind of start to develop that wanting to protect and advocate for it. So I think it's such a great thing that you've been able to start a community that fosters that and have a voice where it is shared. I know it can be kind of overwhelming, like when you're kind of starting out on that awareness of how much climate change is impacting our environments. Is there any kind of simple advice or tips that you would give to someone that's just a small step so they can start going in the right direction?
Yeah, I'd say that there's so many levels of action that we can all take, and it'd just be finding something that you're really comfortable with.
Yeah.
So, there's so many things that we can do in our everyday lives. Individual actions such as, it could be like small choices that we make from, what surf equipment we buy. Like if you're choosing neoprene or a plant-based rubber wetsuit, makes a big difference. And even just purchasing things in general, it could be looking at like, do I really need that umpteenth t-shirt that's going to sit in my drawer and not be used? Because everything that we consume does have an impact on the climate. We can look at our diets. Eating locally is obviously a huge step forward. It cuts down on travel emissions and the footprint of our food. There's also, I'm not going to go down the food rabbit hole, but also how things are grown. So like just really investigating the choices that you make with the way that you eat. It's something that we do every day. And if you calculate it by 365 days a year, it makes a big difference.
And that makes sense.
So there's that. And then obviously, as surfers, looking at how far we're driving, where we're getting there, like try carpooling with your mate every now and then if it's a possibility. Surf your local instead of driving, checking like 25 different spots, and we usually always end up at the first or second spot anyway. So just sort of being aware that everything that we do has an impact, and making choices that better that. There's also obviously, installing solar on your rooftop, choosing a green provider if you're renting, looking at where your money is invested. So like our banking and our super funds are another really big one that can create quite immediate and fast change. A lot of these banks and super funds are investing in the fossil fuels that we actually don't want.
I've had that before, and I had no idea until you said that, and I'd never ever did that. Do you know what I mean? I was like, whoa, like that's mind blowing.
Something a lot of people, if it's at the back of your mind, it's not something that you're actively thinking about. And it's
and then there's obviously, there's all those individual things, but they're all, I guess, pressuring towards larger systemic changes that need to happen with a lot of our government policies and big businesses. So, if you have a protest going on that seems like it resonates with you, like turn up. It makes a difference. If you see a petition hit your inbox or float by on Instagram, sign it, because your signature does make a big difference.
Yeah, because that's what I find, like for a lot of people, it can be overwhelming, so just breaking that down, like those simple things, just makes it so much more achievable, I feel, in a really, so thank you for that.
And it empowers you as well. Once you feel empowered, knowledge is empowerment.
Completely. The most powerful thing I think I've ever experienced was the fight for the bite paddle out, and if 10 of us turned up to that, nothing would have changed. There was thousands of us, and actually tens of thousands across the country on all our coastlines, and we made a big difference. And I think that goes to show what uniting does, and that within our surfing community, there's so many of us here in Australia that if we all just came together and stood up for the things that mattered, then we would be in a better place environmentally and have a safer climate.
So awesome.
Beautiful.
Love that.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing too, that's again, like so inspirational, like for me, like you've led the forefront with blogging. You are bringing awareness to things, and to people, myself included, about things that, to be real, like you get in your bubble and you're living your life, and then like, you care about these things when they're brought to attention. But if there wasn't people like yourself that were bringing the awareness, truthfully, it wouldn't be on my radar. And it's not in a bad instance. It's just because it's what life is, you know, and I'm grateful that yourself and Sam and other people that, you know, stood up and gone, hey, like, check this out, because otherwise, yeah, I'm being honest here, I wouldn't have probably looked in that direction.
Absolutely. Yeah.
As much as you want to help.
And that's and also having people that are at the front, leadership happens from the top.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Like being a leader in that space, you're creating a whole lot of other leaders.
Yeah.
So it's really, really
completely. And I think we're all just learning as we go. As long as we want to do better and make a positive impact, then that's all that really counts. And that's a big part of Surfers for Climate, is that we want, you know, you don't have to have environmental experience. You don't have to be super green in your past life. Like, we want you to start your experience with us, and hope to be able to provide everybody really easy ways in order to make these changes.
Yeah, no, you definitely are. It's so awesome. Definitely.
Well, we might do a little shift. We know you've travelled a lot with your surfing and been to some really cool locations. Is there anything that, really, I think the main question is, like, what made you decide to settle here in Victoria around the surf coast?
Well, it's just so beautiful, really.
Yeah.
I found myself coming down here to visit Patagonia when they started off in Torquay.
Yeah.
Always really loved it. Fell in love with Possos. Thanks to Sasha Litmanis.
Yeah.
And I would come down for like, go visit for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden find myself down here 2 months later, not wanting to leave.
Yeah.
It's the array of waves as well. Like, I love that on, you know, any given day you can be riding, you know, 2 to 3 4-foot beach breaks, and then head on over to road night and pull your log out and, you know, have an amazing time on that.
No, I get that. Obviously, myself growing up in Byron and stuff, it's that the rawness, you know, I don't know if you feel that way, the rawness of the ocean. There's something more powerful. It's beautiful, of course, up there. I guess when you grow up in a certain area and you're there, you know, but the rawness of the surf coast and the cliffs and the, you know, it's so invigorating.
How many times do you find yourself not looking at the lineup and looking at the cliffs?
Yeah, do you find that? Yeah,
completely. Yeah, I'll often be sitting there and just be like checking out all the colours and the different layers of sediments and being like, oh, surfing, that's right, that's why I'm out here. So, and then it's, of course, like when you go, you know, the other side of Apollo Bay around to the Otways, you're just so exposed and vulnerable. And I think that's also a really fantastic reminder of just how powerful and immense the ocean is, and it's great to be able to expose yourself in those situations.
Yeah, so cool.
Awesome. I've got this might be a little bit guilty of, like, a guilty pleasure of mine, but I would love to hear more about your experience of being on the cover of the Surfer's Journal. Like, what was that like? How did that come about, and what was it like?
Well, I was actually living at Noosa at the time, and surfing a lot of, you know, First Point and Tea Tree, and we were actually at First Point. There was no one out, which Ange would know is like extremely rare. The tide was too high for it, and the swell was quite small, but once every like 10 or so minutes, like 2 wave set would come through and hug real tight to the rocks. And Dane Peterson was there shooting and sort of, I guess, starting out his photography career. And he's like, oh, if you like nose ride through here, I might be able to get an all right photo of you. I was like, all right, cool. Like, I'll go try. No one out at First Point, gonna surf anyway. And he snapped the shot and I think submitted it to Surfers Journal through some friends who said, hey, maybe they might be interested in running it. And then all of a sudden, like a couple months later, got a call and was like, hey, it's actually on the cover. And I was like, oh, cool, that's amazing. And they're like, actually, it's a really big deal because there's been no other female ever on the cover of Surfers Journal. So I was pretty blown away by that. But really, I guess, honoured for it to be included in their magazine in general, and to get a cover shot. So
it's right. It's monumental, really.
I feel like it's very,
yeah,
it's like a pivot point. Like it's awesome. It's like a stick in the sand.
Yes.
It's really,
yeah, definitely.
Well,
I'm here, we're here. Yeah, exactly. Love that.
Yeah, and at the time, I guess that's when logging sort of started booming worldwide, and I think just through the nature of it, it attracts so many women. Like, it's such a beautiful thing to be able to connect with. It's kind of a non-confrontational, non-threatening way just to surf, I guess. Like, the boards work better when the waves are smaller. Not that girls aren't charging, because they totally are, but it's, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's like,
yeah.
It's so fun just to be out there and not feel threatened. And now when you surf places, you know, that are log friendly, such as Noosa, Byron, Possos, Fishos down here, Road Night, all these waves, I'm often out there with more women than I am men, which is also amazing to see now. Like, people are out there just having so much fun. It's brought a real different vibe to the lineup as well.
Yeah, I love that you touched on that, because that was actually going to be one of our questions too. Like, in the fact, do you notice, obviously by saying that, you do notice the difference for you growing up too, like in your local area? Like, how many women would you see in the water when you'd be surfing?
There was me and like one other, so not many. And you know, now in Newcastle, you go out and there's women surfing everywhere. And particularly, like I mentioned, in the longboard friendly zones, like, we outnumber the men the majority of the time.
Yes.
And it's just so nice to share that different energy out in the water. Everybody seems really encouraging of each other. It's definitely a less judgmental space, and not as serious, which is also really nice.
Yeah, that's so true.
What advice would you give to your younger self, like on the Newcastle coast, you and one other girl out there? Like, what would there be any wise words you'd give her?
I'd probably say to not do anything that you feel like you may ever regret.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know, obviously that comes along, that's a pretty broad notion.
Yeah.
But just to, you know, any big decision that you make, think about, am I going to regret this later, you know? And I think in a surfing sense, my dad always taught me to never hesitate, to 100% commit with whatever you're doing. And I think that sort of spreads across your whole life as well. And so I think that's been like one of the best life lessons that I've ever been given off anybody. So that'd be the other side of that I always say to people, like, if you're going to do it, commit 100%.
Love that. Yeah.
Be in it.
Yeah. So awesome.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
So we do like a little random quirky thing at the end.
Yep.
So what we usually ask people, what would you like, basically what would you call a book? Like, if you had to have a book about yourself and there was a title, what would the title be? Yeah. And I put you on. And what do you think I would read? Like, covering your life or whatever you feel? Yeah.
I'd call it Fish Out of Water.
Sick. Love that. Yes.
And it would probably be the story of a unconfident, clumsy female who found her femininity, confidence, and voice in the ocean.
Love that,
Belinda.
That's
beautiful.
That's so awesome.
That's really nice.
I would want to read that book.
Yeah, can you write it for us?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a very good writer, so it might take a while.
Someone else may read. That's awesome.
That's amazing. I think a lot of people would kind of see themselves in a book like that.
Yeah,
as well.
Absolutely resonate with that for sure. Yeah,
it's amazing just all the things that the ocean offers us, and I often look back and think, like, what would I do if I wasn't a surfer? And I can never come up with the answer. I think about all these weird situations of me, like living in Sydney or Melbourne, and it just all doesn't seem right and makes me feel sick. So I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that I've gotten to experience the things that I have and live the life that I have, and I guess the lifestyle that surfing provides all of us, and the connections that we make through that as well, whether it be connections to nature, to the natural world, and of course to the like-minded friends that it's brought me as well.
Yeah. And we're so grateful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for coming.
Belinda, it's been so awesome. Thank you.
I feel like
for the
someone
talk.
who didn't know a lot about your, like, how you started out and that competitive side, like, I found that so fascinating. And really like, there's almost two different sides. There's like where you are now and how you got there, and that's been really cool to listen to.
It's true, actually, you're right. Like, it's almost, I feel it's so awesome to hear that story, that, you know, you've lived two different phases in the way that you can approach surfing as well, which is so awesome. You know, like, you've covered it. It's like tick, 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 tick. So yeah, thank you so much.
There's been a lot of years in the ocean, so lots of time.
It's so rad. Isn't it rad that the ocean can give you all those opportunities too?
Oh, it's amazing. So amazing, and something I would never trade for anything.
Thank you so much, Belinda Baggs.
Thank you.
Thank you.